And almost like how much they communicate physically and kind of like giving each other those like signals in the moment and stuff like that.
There's
like the quips that they say to each other.
Yeah, and even speaking and whispering to one another like in front of these audiences.
Fellas, how you doing?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm great. Now, before the Iron Claw, who grew up a wrestling fan? Anybody?
To a degree, I had a cousin who was very heavily into the WWE. And I definitely had like a John Cena action figure growing up. And,
did you?
Yeah, I did. And I was scared of the Undertaker. I mean, that's what I remember that.
Yeah, I think all of us. I think we're pretty similar. I was a fan from the periphery, but I wasn't like my parents didn't encourage us to watch it in the house because my brother and I would just start wrestling. So
That's it.
it was kind of like if we could sneak it on, we were able to watch it. But that was
Yeah, I would like watch it at friends' houses and stuff like that. But I wasn't like incredibly familiar.
Yeah.
My mom was not a fan that I was a fan of wrestling. She would be like, if you don't behave, I'm going to invite the Undertaker to your birthday party. That's it. I'm following in line. So now that you guys have had so much kind of experience learning wrestling, you've trained for wrestling to portray wrestlers in the Iron Claw, I'd love to hear whether it's because you had some knowledge of wrestling from being a fan or being on the periphery, or just preconceived notions from the things you'd hear about wrestling. What are some of the things that you kind of surprised you that you learned, and what are some of the terminology that wrestlers use in the ring to communicate? I'd love to hear you guys talk about some of the experiences and things you learned there.
Terminology was fascinating. The shorthand, which we have Chavo Guerrero as our coach for all the wrestling scenes. So that's one of he kind of just started talking in the lingo, and I remember looking over the guys being like, "What's he talking about?"
And almost like how much they communicate physically and kind of like giving each other those like signals in the moment and stuff like that.
There's
like the quips that they say to each other.
Yeah, and even speaking and whispering to one another like in front of these audiences.
It's really is like it's such a team effort. Whatever side you're on, being the aggressor or the it's all of it's better when you're really working closely together. So it was really fun to learn about that.
Yeah. And I think the idea of the babyface and the heel and like all that stuff was new to me, and kind of like the good versus evil and how important that sort of like traditional storytelling and narrative is, and how much it builds up those rivalries that really like fuel the audience's like excitement about these matches.
And that language, the shorthand you're talking about, does fuel a lot of the matches we see on that professional level. But also, I know you guys are running like the entire matches sometimes over and over, like the full match.
Yeah.
And you're getting through it for the sake of performing the match. So with all that skill you have developed as wrestlers now, I know there have been celebrity matches in wrestling. Who would be the most likely out of the group to go do a celebrity match if WWE came calling and said,
I feel like it's gotta be Zac. Like Zac is still in really crazy shape. I feel like I just let myself go.
Oh, we could all get up there with a little bit of.
I mean, your character wasn't very, Kevin wasn't necessarily the best on the mic, but I mean, he wasn't. I mean, but I feel like you would be great.
Yeah.
Oh man.
We'll see. I think it's something that would be really fun to do. Maybe we could do it for promotion for the film. But I think also Harris or Holt. Harris would.
Oh yeah,
Holt would be amazing.
Totally
out there. He plays Fritz, our dad, in the movie, and he's so electric.
Surprised Holt hasn't been there already. Shows up.
Yeah, he just really wrestled. By the way, he was just 100% real. He was,
Oh, that's cool. I've been training for the past year, and I'm learning a lot of it. It's fun, man. It's cool to see you guys do it. So my last question, and Zac, I want to come to you for this one, because you've worked with one of the biggest wrestlers of all time ever with The Rock when you guys did Baywatch together. So I'm curious if he had any advice for you in terms of how to take on that wrestling mentality.
It's fun. I didn't actually talk with him that much about this. I kind of just came into it rather quickly, but just after we finished filming, I did a movie with John Cena, and I talked with him about it, and he's a big fan of the Von Erichs, so it was really fun to talk with him just about the world, and I feel like I finally had something cool to talk with him about, because he knows it more than anyone else, and hearing that he was excited, just about the concept of it, was a fan of the Von Erichs growing up, it made me feel the importance, of the film. So I'm excited for him to check it out, and of course for Dwayne too. Yeah.
Sean, I grew up a huge wrestling fan. Do we have that in common?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so let me start there. Okay. Mount Rushmore of wrestlers. Easy one to start with, right?
I wish I prepared for this one. Bret Hart. Rock.
Okay, I like where you're going with this.
Undertaker. And I gotta put Kevin Von Erich on there.
Fair enough. I was wondering if there was going to be a Von Erich on the list. Like, how are we going to get? That's a good list. I respect that. I respect that. So now, having been a wrestling fan, you clearly know your stuff with the great Mount Rushmore there. After learning so much more about it, as I imagine you did in directing the Iron Claw, was there any presumptions you had or preconceived notions about the sport that you had that you learned and were surprised by getting to dissect it? I
would say just being able to go inside the world on a sort of like daily level and on a level of minutia of what it takes. I mean, I think outside as fans, if we're really into it and you really dig, you have some understanding. But until you stand in a ring and realize how hard the ropes are and how hard the mat is, and the rush of the crowd and the simple come down of that every day, and like how to sort of what like thinking about things like what it must feel like to be trying to come down from a match and then have to build yourself back up and do it again the next day or 2 days later. I mean, that is those sorts of things where I think I had an understanding of them because I'd considered them until I sort of stood in a ring and felt them and stood with people who actually did it. It's more of like a depth of that understanding and compassion for it.
That's cool. I know a lot of the guys did some wrestling training. Did you put yourself through any ropes?
I thought I would.
I
had this dream that I was going to, and I got in the ring. I was like, no, I'm not doing this.
Bumping on that mat is tough,
I'm too old. Maybe 10 years ago, but like.
Fair enough.
I turned
Smart
42
play.
yesterday. I'm not going to start.
Well, happy belated. Happy belated. Now, directing a wrestling match as a wrestling match on television calls for such an incredible team effort, from the cameraman with the zooms to the cuts to the knowing the timing, and it's a live performance.
Yeah.
And I know you guys ran entire matches for the Iron Claw, so I'd love to. I mean, in what ways did you look at the presentation of a wrestling match and some of the matches that you recreated in the movie and find a way to look at what they did on television and make it cinematic?
Yeah, so I wanted to use some of that, but also take some license, because when I approached a match, I first and foremost thought about the emotion of the match. Like, what's the best place for the camera to tell the emotional story that Kevin's going through? And that was always guiding first. But also, I wanted to have a sense of, WCCW was the first company using handheld cameras on the side of the mat, and so to have a bit of like in-ring handhelds, and then also to cut to the very famous TV angle, and to have that combination in certain moments, but then also to just, have the liberty to cut out wide to just see the whole place and to see, so we just made different decisions based on that and tried to always like walk that line between experiencing the wrestling but breaking it and being more subjective.
I know you guys had MJF in a small role, and he's an executive producer on the film as well.
Yeah.
I love to hear. I mean, he is one of the biggest names in wrestling right now. His star is shooting to the moon and beyond. Think about what did he bring to the film? What kind of expertise did he bring to you guys on the Iron Claw?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just such a huge fan of his, and so we reached out to him and just how to make a cameo, and he was just another voice in the process for me of. For me as a fan, and I think wrestling in particular, when you make a film about wrestling, if it's not right, you're going to get taken down. And so for me, it was consistently bringing in the people that I could to make sure the level was as high as it could be, and he was one of those.
Absolutely, wrestling fans are protective of,
yes.
their wrestling. My last question: you cast someone as Ric Flair, which I find that Ric Flair is one of those guys who lived the gimmick. He's such an incredible character of a human. Was that one of the more challenging roles to cast? How did you go about it?
So, it was hard to cast in terms of like, how am I ever going to get someone to play Ric Flair? But it wasn't because I knew who the person was.
Okay.
So I had made Aaron Dean Eisenberg, who plays Ric Flair in the movie. I had done a show with him called Dead Ringers, and he came in and did an episode for me, and he was just incredible and just had this like wildness to him, and I just had this idea, and so I called him at one point, and I said, will you do me a favor? It's quite a small role, but it's Ric Flair. So he was like, absolutely. And he actually really trained and bulked up and really went for it. But yeah, it was amazing.